oh, just let me oh.
That clock keeps ticking like a metronome, and my thoughts keep telling me to get me home, but my balls keep telling me to let me oh, just let me oh.
Brutal. That is the word I would use to describe the Royal Oak. Brutal. Simply 70s design at its finest. To some it is a piece of art, and to others it is the ugliest watch in existence. It is polarizing, but that is partly the reason why it is such a successful piece of design. We know the story about the watch and how it helped revitalize the platform of Swiss watchmaking in the 70s. We know that because of it, the idea of luxury steel watch became a genre. But design is something that is never spoken about on watch channels. And instead of reading about it from a brochure, I am fortunately in a position to discuss the topic at length. So let's get into it. The modern design process consists of many parameters. But the sad thing is that the outside world does not see or share in the processes that go into creating a product. These are times when some of the best work is put aside in favor of the direction that best suits the product. So the consumer sees the end result without the faintest idea of how or why the object came into being. To sum up the process, there is inspiration, ideation, prototyping, and the actual production. The inspiration is categorized depending on the mood that is chosen for the product. From here, inspiration boards are made up, looking at certain design aspects that would be utilized, and then the ideation process begins. First with small sketches that are then developed and finalized. Then mock-ups are made, and after the prototyping phase, we get to see what will resemble the final object. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Because some of the best designs never need to go through this process at all. Some designs are sketched out over the course of a week, a day, or in 5 minutes, and are left just the way they are. There is a lot of contention about this between designers, because we would argue that elements might have been missed. Other opportunities might have made the final result better, but sometimes that is not the case, and in the case of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, this watch managed to land in the butter. Of course, elaborate processes like this were not as prominent as they are now, since there are many more parameters that need to be considered nowadays. But even back then, something as simple as designing a watch was a very involved process. So let's have a look at the 15402, the original Jumbo Royal Oak, and critique it. First, before looking at its features, I think the watch was sized perfectly at 39mm. As some of us who have worn the Royal Oak styled watches before know, the watch generally wears 2mm more than what it suggests. So in the case of this, the watch wears just above the usual size of a sports watch. But what is more interesting is the bezel to dial ratio. The bezel is not only a feature for the watch, but also a functional element. So having it in the forefront is paramount. I say this because this watch wears its heart on its sleeve. One of the greatest subtleties that makes this watch stand out is that all of its functional elements also add to the watch's aesthetics. We need look no further than to the black rubber gasket that is visible underneath the bezel. The watch on a whole falls into the category of being industrial, hard, aggressive. If we look at the watch from the face, it looks rugged, but the perspective changes when the bracelet catches the light. As some of you may know, the Royal Oak designer, Gerald Genter, was known as a bracelet designer first, going on record saying that he actually hates watches. So it is fair to say that he might have had the idea for the bracelet first and then integrated it into the case. That's the next element, integration. Watches until this time were seen with leather straps and spring bars, the bracelets being separate entities from the watch head. But again, this watch did something unique that practically every other watchmaker in the industry tried to mimic throughout the 70s. I mean, look at this. When we look at the design language of the watch, every individual element sings. Every aspect is sharp. Notice how the bezel is mimicked by the crown, looking identical to an M6 nut. Every surface is almost entirely brushed, with small additions of polishing on the edges. This is also going against traditional watchmaking in many ways. The one element of polishing that I enjoy the most, that I think you will all agree on, is the polishing around the bezel. It's just masterful. Now let's forget the hype train. Let's forget the snobbery and the unanimous praise that this watch receives from everyone on this platform. I have praised the watch, but now I'm going to drop some reality bombs. This watch is not perfect. It's debatable whether any watch is truly perfect. So let's have the dislikes fly for this section of the discussion. Like I said in the beginning, some see this watch as a piece of art, while others think it is the ugliest watch in existence. Why is that? Why is there such a divide between watch enthusiasts? I guarantee that if you had to ask 90% of the people why they think it is ugly, they will say these words: I just don't like it. That's interesting. See, their brain knows that something is amiss, but they cannot put the thought into words. The word, I believe, is juxtaposed, or juxtaposition. There are elements that this watch has that are great, marvelous in fact, but when the elements are collectively put together, there is a clash. I've done some thinking about it for a year or more, and this is what I've concluded at this point. I can chalk it up to a process being missed when this watch was initially designed. The fundamental phase when the watch needed a clarified audience. Audemars Piguet wanted a sports watch that could be sold to perform like a dress watch, asking a high premium for its price. As a result, we have a product that has been made, technically to fit all the elements, but kind of suits none of them. As a sports watch, let's be honest, I don't expect many would want to go rock climbing or running or swimming or polo playing with this. The movement is ultra thin and delicate. It has barely any water resistance. The watch itself is robust though, I'll give it that. As a more formal dress watch, yes, it can work. It's slim, it can fit well under the cuff, but in steel, for the price of a gold watch, would you not prefer a gold JLC or a Patek on a leather strap for that occasion? How about as an everyday watch? Yes, this could be a one watch for someone, but it lacks so many elements that other, more appropriate sports watches offer. This topic opens a whole new subject on whether this watch is not dated by now. The watch still screams 70s, and there's a question whether people buy them now for the design, for the image, for its accomplishments. I guess what I'm trying to say is that this watch is jarring to me. It is a watch I really like. It is something that I admire, but there are always elements about it that stand out to me, and not always in a positive light. The name Beautifully Ugly is quite catching. Yes, it is industrial looking. Yes, it is brutal. Yes, it has a beautiful bracelet. But with all of that said and done, it has a language all to its own. And no matter what you think about it, the watch is pretty special.